everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, Amanda Head. My co-host and Just the News editor-in-chief, John Solomon, is out on assignment tonight. And as always, I'm reporting to you from Washington, D.C. and our wiredtofishcoffee.com studios. It's the official coffee of Just the News, so head over to wiredtofishcoffee.com and you can get an amazing 10% discount on their coffees, their mugs, all of their great products. So use the code JUSTNEWS at checkout. All right, President Trump's one big beautiful bill has finally made it through the Senate, but not without a few hiccups along the way, and it will now head back to the House of Representatives, where they will look to get it passed and on President Trump's desk before the July 4th deadline, and they don't have very long to get that done, do they? And President Trump addressed it all on the way back from his trip to Alligator Alcatraz in Florida, which I'll get into in just a minute. But first, take a look at how President Trump reacted after the one big beautiful bill announcement came to him of it passing through the Senate.
We got there, we got pretty much what we wanted. It's been amazing. It's the biggest bill ever passed if we get this done. You know, most of the people wanted 7 or 8 different bills. And I thought that was tougher because they'd be 100% that they'd be done. You just realize something for everybody by doing it. So we're happy about it. We're happy with the result.
And considering the process of getting just this one bill through the House and the Senate, I think he's probably not wrong on the lengthy process it would have taken with 8 bills or so. All right, now the GOP no votes on the bill were comprised of Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, Maine Senator Susan Collins, and North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis. All of those are likely suspects. It's also likely that the OBBB will pass the House in the next day or two, but that doesn't mean that there's no more drama surrounding the bill. Elon Musk and President Trump are going at it again, as it seems that their social media ceasefire has officially ended. Musk has been posting a lot about the bill again and again, bringing up that a new political party should be formed to tackle America's debt. He would call it the America Party. And before heading to Alligator Alcatraz earlier this morning, President Trump criticized Musk's criticism.
What happened to Elon Musk?
Nothing, he's upset he's losing his EV mandate, and he's very upset about things, but he could lose a lot more than that. I can tell you right now. Hey, Elon can lose a lot more than that.
Something tells me that we are probably going to be hearing a little bit more from both of these gentlemen in the future. And we have just one more story to get to involving President Trump. He visited what the administration has dubbed Alligator Alcatraz earlier today with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and DHS Secretary Kristi Noem in tow. And the site used to be an old airport that the state of Florida turned around very quickly into an immigration detention center that is intended to hold up to 5,000 illegals awaiting deportation. And the president was in quite a good mood as he toured the facility. Here he is answering a question about the conditions inside Alligator Alcatraz, asked by RAV's very own Brian Glenn.
I think our viewers at home should note that this is air-conditioned facility, yes, so if any of the news claims are keeping them out in the hot, humid South Florida, that is wrong. It's probably 62 degrees here,
to be honest.
or 72.
Hey, yep. Biden wanted me in here, okay? He wanted me. It didn't work out that way, but he wanted me in here.
And I can assure you that compared to outside, inside of that facility was a lot better. All right, let's get back to the one big beautiful bill. And I think my first guest of the night is going to have a lot to say about what is going to happen as it heads back to the House. Ping pong, back and forth as they deliberate. All right, joining us now representing the great state of Wisconsin, Congressman Glenn Grothman. Congressman, thanks so much for being here.
Glad to be on the show.
All right, sir. So from what you have heard of the changes that came out of the Senate, now it is ping-ponging back to the House for you guys to get your hands on again. Is there anything that sticks out in your mind that you're thinking to yourself, we got to tackle this, we got to put this back in, we got to take this out, anything like that?
Thinking that, you got to remember when it first came out of the House, it only passed by 1 vote. Mm-hmm. I think the consensus of people, conservatives in the House, is the Senate made it worse. And our expectation was the Senate would make it better. I know Donald Trump wants it done by July 4th, but I think Donald Trump would agree we'd rather have a good package on July 21st than a bad package on July 4th. There are some things we knew were going to be in there last February, right? We all knew we were going to extend the tax cuts from 2017. We all know there's going to be no tax on tips or no tax on overtime. We all knew that there was going to be more money for the border. The question is, other than that, are we increasing or decreasing the cost of government, the scope of government? And I think a lot of us feel right now we're disappointed. As you know, I've been kind of focusing on something called the Earned Income Tax Credit, something where recently the Washington Post ran an article. We are paying developers 70% of the cost of their unit. I mean, look at some of these other tax cuts, these green tax credits. We are paying 70% of the cost of a new apartment building, which is ridiculous. And because of that, there are new projects in the District of Columbia costing over $1 million per unit for a rental property. Just unbelievable. You have a horrible program like this. Obviously, it should disappear. It's costing $12 billion a year. And so far, the Republicans have added to the program. They want to spend still more. They look at this ridiculous program that's can cost over $1 million a unit to build a new apartment dwelling, and they say it's got to go up. So that's the type of thing that I think has to come out before it passes the House. And I think too many Republicans, they didn't get a good enough pep talk when this thing began, that our goal is to cut the role of government in American life. And we just got to straighten things out. And if that takes another couple of weeks, it takes another couple of weeks.
I mean, that is such a sizable portion of the bill to pay, as you know, for the federal government when it comes to these new housing units. What's the justification for that? Why does anyone think that the federal government should pay for that? Well, I shouldn't say the federal government, the American taxpayers.
Yes, a lot of politicians forget how hard people work for their tax dollar. They just figure it's free money, and they don't care if things aren't that good, or maybe the lobbyists just did a good job of soft selling the congressman, or maybe they took him on a tour of a lavish apartment building and said, doesn't this look nice? Why don't we build more apartments like this? And the fact that 70% of it is paid for by other people's tax dollars that they worked very hard for, all of a sudden the politician forgets that, which happens way too much around there. And that's why, of course, that provision is in the bill and even expanded, because the type of congressmen who voted to expand that program, they were not thinking how hard the taxpayer worked. We should not be paying over $1 million a unit for new construction, and particularly on projects that are supposed to be for low-income people.
Right. Absolutely. I hear you, and I can feel your emotion in it because it is just so nonsensical. Speaking of nonsensical.
Remember, they're selling you this as a conservative bill. No.
I know. And I mean, it's gallows humor, I suppose, because I think you're exactly right about that. But speaking of nonsensical, Senator Chuck Schumer said this earlier about the bill. He said, today, Senate Republicans betrayed the American people and covered the Senate in utter shame. And then he said, people will die, kids will go hungry. I think he's talking about USAID being stripped of waste, fraud, and abuse, but what is he talking about?
I don't know. I suppose they are looking at what we did in the past. I think they're looking at some work requirements, maybe, to get on some welfare programs. There is no danger of kids dying. And if he's worried about what's going on abroad, he's kind of being outdated because we passed that bill a while back. But there was a lot of waste in the foreign aid budget. As a matter of fact, worse than waste, stuff that would be better off if we didn't spend the money at all. Maybe that's what he was talking about, but there's no danger there. I don't think there's danger with regard to health care. There's so much waste in this government. We got to remember what DOGE uncovered just a couple months ago. And we've got to remember that right now, we're borrowing 26% of our federal budget. Mm-hmm. I think the press ought to come back at Schumer and say, hey, we're borrowing 26% of our budget. 1 out of every 7 of your tax dollars is going for interest expense. How much longer do they think this is going to continue and America still be a great country? I mean, these people, they complain about everything like it's the end of the world. And I do not think anybody is going to be going without food at all, even remotely. As a matter of fact, I think right now there's probably more food out there than necessary. Whatever, we throw away something on the order of, I think, 30% of the food in America, and, you know, food stamps, school lunch, all that stuff continues.
Congressman, I suppose you and I are doing quite a bit of piling on when it comes to the negatives about this bill, but there've got to be some positives because you voted for it. What are some of the highlights in this? I know obviously border security, this is a historic commitment towards that, but what are some of the good things?
We have to continue the tax cuts that were put in effect in 2017, because not to continue the tax cuts means, as a practical matter, a tax increase for the American public. Not only is that bad on an individual basis because you and I have less money to spend, but it's bad for the economy because if all of a sudden people don't have enough money to spend, it hurts business, hurts jobs of people in retail and manufacturing, and the whole economy goes south. So I'd say the number one thing is we continue the tax cuts of 2017. I think number two, I like what they've done with the overtime and no tax on overtime. A lot of Americans out there, I think, would work more hours and would increase the productivity of this country if they worked overtime. But if they're going to tax you and nail you for 30, 40% of the additional money you make in overtime, a lot of people sit at home and say, why should I work overtime just to pay the government more money? So I think that was a good idea of President Trump and will increase the productivity of the average American worker.
All right, sir, we've just got a few minutes left. I want to ask you about something really disturbing. Over on CNN, they were reporting on this crowdsourcing app that allows people to input locations of ICE raids and deportations and arrests and things like that. And CNN reported on this. So, you know, they're putting it out there, making it even more well-known. And again, it's crowdsourcing, so people can contribute to this, and that's what actually drives the information on the app. At the same time, we have this new data out that ICE agents, that crimes against ICE agents, assaults against them have gone up 700%. Do you think they're related?
They're related. It's like they're cousins, the police, and it's a continuation of this idea of we hate authority members, we hate the type of people who are keeping us safe, and we want them to be physically harmed. We went through this in the get rid of the police movement a few years ago, and now it's get rid of ICE. And part of it is we have too many childish members of our society, spoiled childish members, who think we can sit there and accept the 10 million people that Joe Biden left in this country without damaging this country. Even if they don't break the law, and of course some will break the law, even if they don't break the law, it will fundamentally change America. It's causing the cost of a lot of things to go up. It's increasing the cost of housing, of course, if we have 10,000 more people running around this country looking for apartments. And not to mention, it's going to change the ideological makeup of the country, because a lot of these people don't believe in the freedoms that we take for granted and our Bill of Rights. So in many ways, this is a big problem. And of course, the attacks on ICE are driven by the internet right now, as these radicals are looking for people, just as Antifa used to be destructive. And they're going to get a given number of unhappy people to go along on this type of thing. The Antifa people.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's Pollyannish. It is a pie-in-the-sky notion to think that you can leave all of these illegals here and think that it is. Yeah.
Childish. It comes from spoiled people who think they're always going to have this wonderful America we have right now, even if we let in another 15 or 20 million people. And I'll tell you, it's going to be a very different America, no longer the great America that you and I grew up in.
Yeah, sir, I remember seeing a video shortly before the election of a guy who used to be a Democrat, but he came out against all of the social justice issues of the left. And he basically said, elite Democrats, those are the people who can afford to worry about social issues. The rest of us have to just live our lives, work our jobs, pay our taxes, buy groceries, buy gas, and move on with our life, because it's a luxury to think about those types of things. Congressman Glenn Grothman from the great state of Wisconsin, thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thanks for having me, Amanda.
Absolutely, sir. All right, coming up, more on the One Big Beautiful Bill. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says that if the bill is signed into law, we are going to see incredible growth in the economy. But is our debt still a concern? Yeah, betcha. We'll talk about that after this break.
Hey folks, if you're a homeowner like me, you need to listen to this. In today's AI and cyber world, scammers are stealing home titles and your equity is their target. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on one document, use a fake notary stamp, pay a small fee with your county, and boom, just like that, your home title has been transferred out of your name. And that's when the problems begin, because they start taking out loans using your equity and even sell your property. And you're not even going to find out it's happened until you get a collection or foreclosure notice months later. That's a nightmare, right? So when's the last time you checked on your home title? Well, if you're like me, the answer is never, right? You need to do something about that right now. That's why I've partnered with Home Title Lock, so you can find out today if you're already a victim. Use my promo code JTN at HometitleLock.com, and you'll get a free title history report and a free trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes that might happen, and if fraud does happen, they'll spend up to $1 million to fix it. That's a good deal. Find out why I trust Home Title Lock. Go to HometitleLock.com and use the promo code JTN. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code JTN.
Welcome back to Just the News, No Noise. The one big beautiful bill has officially passed the Senate, and now it goes back to the House, where we get ready for some more debate. And that begs the question, what are the actual pros and cons of this bill? We have seen former allies of President Trump, like Elon Musk, come out against the bill for adding too much to the debt or the deficit, but we have also heard senators and congressmen who have voted for the bill saying that it actually cuts spending. So joining us now to break it all down, break down the ins and outs of this bill and what it means for the economy and the American people, is economist from the American Institute for Economic Research, Thomas Savage. Thomas, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me on, Amanda.
All right, I want to start, let's start at budgeting 101, because I think for the American people, it just seems really wonky that you can cut spending at the same time that a budget bill or a reconciliation bill increases the debt or the deficit. But those three things can coexist, can they not, and how?
Well, so this is something that's called a reconciliation bill, and that's where Congress tries to usher a spending bill through an expedited process to try to get in something faster than the normal budget process. We've seen this not just with the One Big Beautiful Bill, with those numerous omnibus bills over the years where Congress is trying to get something on the president's desk by the 11th hour. Makes you think of those students in school that were working on something and just submitting it before the deadline at 11:59 p.m. And so that's kind of what's going on there. They're trying to meet that July 4th deadline. But I think, as Representative Grothman just before me said, they'd rather have a good bill get in on July 21st than try to rush something in that's not great on July 4th.
Yeah. And by the way, I was that college student for practically every single deadline, and somehow now I'm in the chair.
We've all had those moments. We've all had
I'm sure those moments were few and far between for me, I'm sure. All right, the good and the bad and the ugly of this bill. What's good?
So the good thing is the extension of the 2017 tax cuts. We like to see that. We want to see Americans keep what they're earning, because otherwise they would have been hit with a tax hike. You'd like to see those, you want to see those no taxes on overtime. You want to see those. It's good that Americans are keeping their hard-earned money. But even with this good stuff, it's a first step on a long road ahead. The long-term goal there should be simplifying the tax code. Instead of having, a graduated income tax system with different rates for different incomes, and dozens of escape hatches, so people end up declaring lower income or fewer income or saying this is exempt or that. Simplify things. Keep it simple. You should be able to file your taxes on a postcard. That's how simple it should be, because that way, there's reduces uncertainty. Yeah. Everybody pays a flat rate, and you save time, you save money, you keep your hard-earned money, and you don't get punished for making more money either.
Well, and Thomas, what happened to that? Because I remember that was a big initiative during President Trump's first term, and then President Trump was out of office. Danny Werfel came in, and that initiative fell completely flat. You think there's any chance that they'll pick that football up again?
Oh, let's hope, but the jury's still out on that one, unfortunately. As with anything in Washington, once something gets started, it's very hard to stop it, even harder to get something to reverse course. So even just trying to undo a lot of the Medicaid expansion that's happened over the previous administration, and try to rein in a lot of that waste, fraud, and abuse that we're seeing in these government-funded healthcare programs, just to keep them financially stable, at least for a couple more years, instead of having them dangerously run close to the edge there, is proving to be more difficult than expected.
All right, so I already know what you're going to say about the bad part of this bill, and I totally agree with respect to the state and local tax deduction cap. That was raised to $40,000. What was it before?
So previously it was capped at $10,000.
That's
That
what I
came
thought.
out under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act back in 2017. And so when you think about this, it allows big tax and spending states, states like California, states like Illinois, states like New York, to tax and spend as much as they like, and then have some of that offset by taxpayers in other states. If you're paying, if you're paying higher taxes, you deduct some of that in your federal tax bill, and that ends up being covered by the tax payments of folks who are living in low tax states. And so in a way, SALT allows irresponsible government spending at the state level. And for those folks that are still in the high tax states, I would say, many of my friends and family in New York, it's not the federal government's fault. It's not Washington's fault that your state tax bill is bigger. It's Albany's fault. The state governments need to rein in spending just as much as DC does.
Yeah, well, and I hate to talk about the obvious, but when it comes, I mean, if you've got a $40,000 cap on state and local taxes, anyone who's paying $40,000 just in state and local taxes, I'm pretty sure they're doing just fine, and maybe they don't need the deductions to begin with.
Well, that's the difficult thing is, of course, a dollar only goes so far in certain states. It goes
That's
much
true.
farther in low tax states than it does in higher tax states. And it's like you can kind of feel the sympathy if you hear from folks that they're losing money, they're not being able to keep their hard-earned money, but that should translate into pressure on state and local governments to budget more responsibly. And at best, the folks that are being hit by SALT, SALT is at best a Band-Aid, but for those folks that are really being hit, but ultimately, again, it's hurting the majority of Americans. It's the majority of Americans covering the tax bills of wealthy folks in high tax and spending states.
Yeah. Well, as a Californian, I don't expect Gavin Newsom or anybody in Sacramento to have any type of come to Jesus moment when it comes to budgeting, but I guess we can certainly hope that the pressure would be put on. All right, the ugly part of this, this is a big piece of legislation. It is in the name of the bill, big, beautiful bill. So there's obviously going to be a lot of compromise. It means diluting some of the meaningful reforms, the Medicaid, reducing green energy subsidies. What happened to all of that? I mean, it obviously is not as potent as it was before.
Well, that's it. Like you said, these bills, any piece of legislation, but especially the large pieces there, legislation in this country, it requires compromise to get across the finish line. And so there are going to be members of both houses of Congress that aren't quite happy with the straightforward cuts. So they're going to want to water stuff down or add things here or extend the timeline on these certain things. But I think it was really interesting that even with the watering down of those Medicaid reforms, speaking of Governor Newsom, I was surprised to see that this week, California, Illinois, Minnesota, and Washington, D.C. ended Medicaid coverage for illegal immigrants. And California was even talking about adding a premium for Medicaid on legal immigrants. And I think that shows really that states, like you had mentioned, of all places, I'm surprised California's having this come to Jesus moment where they're realizing that whether it happens in this bill or sometime in the near future, Medicaid cuts are coming. So they would rather make those Medicaid changes on their own terms than have some surprise rug pull happen to them when the federal government says, oops, we can't afford to keep things going the way they are. We need to adjust the matching rate and the states need to pick up more of the bill. So that was, I was surprised, but at the very least, it's good to see folks in these good to see, of all places, California. It's good to see them waking up in Sacramento to this.
Yeah, well, California had a $12 billion deficit that was ever increasing. So, they claim to have sympathy for illegal immigrants, but I guess they had to put a price tag on that sympathy. And turns out it's $12 billion. So,
yes.
Economist Thomas Savage, this was such a great conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Amanda.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, after the break, remember all of the high-level investment firms like BlackRock pushing woke ESG policies? We haven't heard much about that in a little while. Is it still happening? Is it still an issue? We're going to talk to the founder of a fund who is fighting against woke ESG investment policies about that next. Tell me the truth. How many different beauty potions do you have sitting on your bathroom counter right now? If it's more than just Vibrant Super C Serum, listen up. The ingredients in this one bottle can replace your day creams, your eye creams, your night creams, your neck creams, your wrinkle creams, and your dark spot reducers. It's made in the USA with the highest quality ingredients, including vitamin C, hyaluronic acid, vitamin B5, and vitamin E. Super C Serum delivers noticeable results. Simplify your skincare routine, get a healthier complexion, and minimize wrinkles and age spots with Vibrance. And if you don't find it better than your current skincare routine, you'll get a full refund. So go to Vibrance.com/justnews to save up to 37% off and free shipping. That is Vibrance, Vibrance, Vibrance.com/justnews. Welcome back, everybody. The fight against woke capitalism just escalated. The American Conservative Values Fund, or ACVF for short, is a proudly anti-woke investment fund traded on the New York Stock Exchange, and they are taking Airbnb to court after the company shut down a shareholder proposal that dared to challenge its political agenda. Backed by the Heritage Foundation, the lawsuit argues that Airbnb broke the rules by refusing to let shareholders even vote on a simple request, which was basically just to stop playing politics and focus on running the business. Imagine that. So joining us now is William Flagg. He's the founder and CEO of the American Conservative Value Fund. William, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Amanda.
All right, so I want to actually go to the origins story of this lawsuit, because there had to have been some instances, some pseudo scandals or whatever with Airbnb that caused a shareholder or shareholders to bring up the point that they should not be politicized. Did that happen?
Yes, I mean there's a couple of instances a few years back where we became concerned that they were using their matching system, which is essentially kind of a credit score, if you will, for the people renting and the people renters. And that algorithm has the ability to discriminate against politically conservative people. I mean, the ability to discriminate against anyone. But our concern is that it could be used, for that purpose. And there was some evidence that that appeared to be the case, and that's kind of why we took the action we did to submit the proposal.
Yeah. All right. So tell us about this lawsuit. What exactly are you guys targeting, and what's the strategy?
Yes. So it is somewhat unusual. So the fund, primarily, we try to avoid the companies that we feel the most hostile to conservative values. We keep them out of the portfolio. For companies we do own, I'd say it's the next level of advocacy. We submit shareholder proposals. It's a right of every shareholder to do so. We've been doing that for a few years at this point with various companies, and Airbnb was the first that lost the proposal, so to speak. There's rules where you mail it, how you address it, when it has to get there, and they lost the proposal. And not only did they lose our proposal, they lost Heritage Foundation's proposal as well. And somehow they didn't lose a liberal proposal from Connecticut Retirement Fund. So as it's very rare that this happens, and I think it's even more rare what happens next, which is when we brought it to their attention, they didn't at that point say, "Oh, we made a mistake. Let's it's a little extra work, but let's use proxies." They just said it was lost, and that's it. No recourse. And that's when the decision was made to take them to court to sue them.
So here's what I don't understand, and this seems like kind of a conundrum for liberals, and I guess maybe it's because they're just so consumed with their ideology. But if they think that their ideology is so morally right, it's so ethically proper, it is so popular, then why are they so afraid to have the consensus of their shareholders on it?
Yeah, I mean, but that's on a side that drives me crazy is they just think they have the moral high ground. It's perplexing.
It absolutely is. So we are seeing a lot of companies put woke ideology, DEI hiring, ESG investments, even anti-Israel activism. They are putting that ahead of profits and therefore putting it ahead of the profits of their shareholders. How did we get to this place in this country where Fortune 500 companies are more concerned about caving to woke Inc. than they are focusing on core values like, making money?
Yeah, well, it took a while. It took a while to happen, and I believe the pendulum has, reached its apex and is going the other way, which is the good news. And Donald Trump's exerting a lot of pressure on them, as long as as well as conservative advocacy groups. But I think it's it goes back a ways. The conservatives are the silent majority. So whenever the left is offended, there's outrage and mobilization and activism on their end, and they do have some captive CEOs like Larry Fink and some of the tech CEOs that are true believers in this stuff. And just basically the path of least resistance for corporate America to not get yelled at was to bow to pressure from the left, boycotts, shareholder proposals. Just conversations in the public square, whereas conservatives, I think I'd say we get upset once in a while, make some noise, but there's never anything sustained. And I think we're finally at the point where we have a sustained voice to put, reinforce that the companies, the shareholders are first. It's not stakeholder capitalism, it's shareholder capitalism, and companies are starting to move back towards neutral.
Yeah. William, I remember a few years ago I was keeping a very close eye on the activities of BlackRock, and they seemed to be very anti-American because they, were participating in the sale of land, even properties and investments to the Chinese, even down to like talent agencies in Hollywood. It was bizarre. Are they still up to their same old tricks?
Well, Larry Fink publicly has backed away from a lot of the DEI initiatives in particular. He's such a true believer. And when something like this happens, you have to question his sincerity, right? Obviously, he's under a lot of pressure at this point to at least not be so public with his viewpoints. So, they give the impression that they've changed or they're going in the right direction. Of course, we have to question their sincerity and see where it goes. But, the overtures are there that he's toning it down.
Yeah. William, I don't know if a lot of our audience is familiar with your organization. They probably are, but I want them to know more about American Conservative Values Fund. So give everybody just a bit of a primer on the types of things that you invest in, what your mission is. Tell everybody about that.
Sure. Thank you. Yes. We launched in 2020, right? A really tough time to launch. We launched right after the election of 2020. And it was pretty much a low point for conservatives that I spoke with, and then we had the Black Lives Matter and all of that. It was a difficult time, and we launched, and the idea was kind of like we were talking about earlier. Let's get politics out of the companies. Let's focus on shareholder value, maximizing shareholder value, and the fund we basically try to avoid. We're a large cap. Exchange traded funds. So a lot of people own, 401ks and IRAs. In there's a mutual fund, a large cap mutual fund, owns some of the biggest companies. And I don't think a lot of people, when they look at that, they realize, through that they're owning Disney, they're owning Nike, they own Meta, formerly Facebook, companies that are really working against their values and what we offer as an alternative is, a fund that tries to eliminate the companies that are the most hostile to conservative values.
Fantastic. And I love that, and I know our audience does too. William Flake, founder and CEO of the American Conservative Values Fund. Thanks so much for being with us tonight, William.
Thank you, Amanda.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, up next, even though John is out on assignment tonight, he's going to be back for this one segment coming up, our weekly Just the News Health Update. That's going to be here right after this break.
It's almost Independence Day, and all of America will be celebrating. But here in Real America's Voice, we want to celebrate you. Every day from June 30th through July 4th, we're giving away a handcrafted, hand-painted hardwood flag to one lucky RAV viewer. These beautiful flags come from YourAmericanFlagStore.com, where 10% of every purchase goes to Your American Flag Foundation. Scan the QR code to opt in for your chance to win and receive future RAV promotions from our hearts for your home. Use code RAV for free shipping.
Welcome back, folks. One of my favorite moments of the week, our Just the News Weekly Health Update, brought to you by our friends at Native Path. Joining us right now, the co-founder and chief culture officer at Native Path. He's one of my biggest gurus. He's really helped me get healthier, Dr. Chad Walding. Doctor, good to have you back on the show. All right. We spent a lot of time the last 3 weeks going through and understanding the dangers of processed food. And I want to pivot today to, all right, we now know the dangers. We now know the sugars, the pesticides, the lack of protein. When you start eating more healthy, when you start pushing the processed food out, natural food back in, then you supplement it with things like Native Path. Tell us some of the things you're going to see in improvements and changes once you start doing this.
Yeah, once we start moving away from the processed and refined food diet that we've all been fed, right? That many of us have been eating for a long time, and we start moving back on the path to whole real food, in other words, the way our great-great-grandparents would eat, we're going to start to notice huge changes in our overall health. There's really three key areas that I always point to, right? Blood sugar regulation. This is one of the biggest things. Like insulin resistance is one of the key areas of what's making us so sick, right? So when you balance your blood sugar through whole real food rather than food that's got a lot of sugar in it, you are going to radically reduce a lot of the metabolic issues that you feel. So weight loss, right? Obesity, things like that. Blood sugar issues tend to go away a lot easier. Blood pressure issues, high triglycerides, cholesterol issues, all the things around the heart tend to get a lot easier when you go to a whole real food diet. And also another one that most people don't think about is your gut, right? When we move to a whole real food diet and move away from the processed and refined foods, our gut health starts to improve. You know, Socrates said, our real true health begins in the gut. This is where we break down food. It's where we absorb the vitamins and the minerals that we eat from the food. It's also when we eliminate toxins, right? So when we have bad gut health, that's going to set us up for a lot of the autoimmune issues that people might have. A lot of the stuff when people go to the doctor and they're like, I feel bad, I don't know what's going on. The doctor's like, I don't know what's going on either. Let's just give you some pills. You know, sometimes that can be helpful, but sometimes it's just poor gut health. And when you have good gut health and digestion gets better, your mood gets better. You know, a lot of the inflammatory issues that a lot of people have dealt with start to get better. So, you know, improving the quality of your life, extending the quality of your life, having more energy, having more productivity, being happier, being healthier, less dependency on pain meds, all of these things are a byproduct of moving towards a more whole real food diet, as we say, getting on the path.
One of the ones that I noticed, and I have to tell you, it was the one I least expected when I started on this journey, and that is I sleep better. I'm not agitated. I wake up in the morning, I'm way more refreshed than I used to be. Is that another part of the body that just gets affected when you get on this path?
Absolutely. And a lot of that comes down to sugar. And when people are dependent on sugar and they have big ups and downs with their blood sugar, right? You wake up in the morning, let's say you have a cereal, some orange juice and a toast and a Pop-Tart or something like that. That big up and down cycle leads to big swings in your energy, right? And a lot of times people will have that throughout the day. And then, you know, if they're eating carbs a lot throughout the day, and I'm really referring to refined carbohydrates, you go to bed, you're ready to sleep, but your blood sugar just takes this big spike again, right? And what that does is it gets your energy up, and you're wired and tired, right? When you regulate your blood sugar a lot more, with specifically with good quality protein or surrounded by whole real food and good fats, you don't have those big highs and big lows. It's more stable throughout the day. It's less volatile, and that allows you, when you go to bed, to fall asleep easy, to fall asleep fast, and to stay asleep through the rest of the night, because your blood sugar is more regulated, which comes from whole real food and good quality protein sources. So we hear that a lot, and that's a big thing. And when you sleep better, everything about your health gets better. That's a whole other world that gets underlooked because of the way we're kind of eating, but also our relationship to light in the modern world, right? So fixing sleep fixes a whole lot of things.
Yeah, it sure does, and it's been one of the many benefits. All right, one of the things I love about Native Path is it's so easy to do. I usually throw it in my coffee, or sometimes I'll have a strawberry smoothie in the morning. I love that, and I just throw it in. No flavor, there's no additives. It's easiest thing in the world to do to get a really big boost in your health overall. What goes on after that happens? When I take it, I drink it down, I go in, I know I'm feeling better in a couple of days, but under all of that, there's some amazing things going on in your body when that absorption of the peptide formula starts occurring, right?
That's right. We're referring to collagen here, right? Collagen is the most abundant protein in the body. And like you said, this is a tasteless, odorless powder that you can put in your coffee. You can put it in your tea. You can just make it a part of your morning routine. And what you're going to be doing is restoring your collagen levels, which have been depleted because of the way we've all been eating and living in this modern world. We have to keep in mind what our biology actually wants in terms of diet. And our ancestors would get plenty of collagen because they would eat nose to tail. Again, it's the most abundant protein in the body. It's what makes up our hair, our skin, our ligaments, even underneath our tendons, our gut lining, even our heart is dependent on collagen, but we're not getting near enough. So many of us are depleted in that. So when you start consuming collagen on a consistent basis, people will notice, they report to us changes. And one of the first things they notice is what's happening on the outside. Like my nails are growing faster. They're stronger. They're not as brittle. They're not breaking as much. And when that change happens, people notice less wrinkles, the hair starts to grow back, and then the bigger stuff, the joints, like how well we moved. You mentioned earlier in a former talk we had about your elbow getting better, knee pain getting better,
that was real.
Back pain getting better. Yeah, so all of that changes because collagen, when we consume it on a consistent basis and we break it down, it goes into our body. The collagen doesn't just go to random areas of the body. It specifically goes to areas that are damaged and helps rebuild them. It's an amazing little molecule. It has this intelligence on its own. So taking it consistently, making it a part of your morning routine is one of the easiest things you can do for your health.
That's amazing. You mentioned before insulin resistance, and there's the new fad of GLP-1 injections. Everyone's getting them to get the magic weight loss, but a lot of people can avoid that injection routine and the expense of it. If you just get on a healthier path and you start getting collagen, you really won't need those injections, right? Because your body's going to heal itself from the inside.
That's right. Yeah, and it's a good thing to bring up. Is why were we having obesity, weight issues in the first place? Because of refined processed foods and sugar, right? So moving back to the basics, and I mentioned earlier, protein is one of the best things we can do. All the benefits that people are hoping to get from the GLP products, they could also get that with the chicken. They could also get that with a steak and some ground meat and some eggs without the side effects. And I'm not saying don't take the medication, but support it with this, right? You use whole real food, good quality protein, and things like collagen to support you on your health journey. In some cases, those medications can be helpful given the context of where people are at, but really support that with good, healthy things that you put into your body, and you'll see even better results.
It's amazing. It's really, I'm a first-hand witness to this, and I'm pretty suspicious. I'm an investigative report. I don't think it's going to work. It really works, and it's made a huge difference. I'm happier and healthier because of the path I've been on, and I want to thank you for helping me get there, Dr. Chad. Your education, the great products you have at Native Path are just amazing, folks. I want you to join me if you're moved by what we talked about today. Here's what you do: go to getnativepath.com/justnews right now. There's a special bundle deal only available because you love RAV and you love Just the News. It's a fraction of the retail price. All you got to do is go to that website, getnativepath.com/justnews. Over 4 million jars of this has been sold, thousands of 5-star reviews. I'm one of them. 365 money day back guarantee. This is your moment to take control of aging before the symptoms get out of control. Go to getnativepath.com/justnews right now. Join me. Check it out. You won't be disappointed. All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Amanda will be back in a second. But first, a few messages.
Welcome back, everybody. We highlighted a story about a month ago about Emmy Award-winning actress Martha Byrne, her husband, NYPD Sergeant Michael McMahon. Martha tells us that her husband is a victim of weaponized justice perpetrated under the Biden administration. She's written a book all about it, too, so everybody go check it out. It's called In the Interest of Justice. Well, her husband has now begun his prison sentence. Joining us now to talk about all this and to get an update is the wife, Martha Byrne. Martha, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you having back on.
Yeah, of course. And you're such a wonderful, wonderful, aggressive advocate for your husband, which I would want my spouse to be if I was in the same situation. We've only got a few minutes left in the show, but this is important. So take a few minutes and tell our audience, for those who didn't see you on this show a month ago, just give everybody kind of a quick briefer on what has happened to your husband.
Oh, he's a retired NYPD sergeant, and he retired and became a private investigator. And in 2016, he did a routine case, some background checks, asset searches, some surveillance, and never thought about it again. Totally routine case. And then 4 years later, they arrested him. The FBI came to my house for failure to register as a foreign agent and interstate stalking. And it was outrageous because there was no evidence of any wrongdoing, no crime. So of course we felt, let's go to trial and he'll win. But what we saw happen was insane, and he was found guilty of interstate stalking and failure to register for FARA and given 18 months in federal prison. And the judge said she wasn't giving him that time because of the crime, because he kind of said he didn't do a crime, but that he had no remorse for the victims, which the victims couldn't even identify him in court and had no idea who he was. So I'm not sure how that worked, but he had to report. Yesterday, I just got back from Michigan. They sent him 600 miles away from my family. And Amanda, I can't even wrap my brain around it. It's so outrageous that they're putting a man who's committed no crime and had overwhelming evidence of his innocence that we couldn't present at trial. They suppressed evidence. They lied to the jury. FBI agents lied on search warrants, on criminal complaints. And I'm speechless as to that my husband is 600 miles away in a federal prison now.
And remind me again, the CCP connection. How does that tie into all this?
So the alleged victims, he was actually a former Wuhan official who was here in this country and illegally. My husband was hired. He was hired just to find assets of a man that had apparently stolen money from China. That's all he knew. His client had millions of dollars stolen from his family business. And my husband was hired by a New York company to find his houses, like a day in the life kind of thing. And sure enough, he found millions of dollars of real estate transactions. And then he just kind of moved on with his life, a typical case. But apparently there was another lane going on that Mike had nothing to do with, that was about repatriating this fellow back to China. But the crimes that he had committed in the United States, this man, we were not allowed to even bring up that at trial. So there's a big CCP connection. One of the agents, Robert Riley, FBI agents in New Jersey, was actually communicating with the alleged victim, helping them with their immigration, helping them with the civil lawsuit. So there's a lot of complicated stuff that has nothing to do with Mike. He was just doing a routine job.
And I know that this started under President Trump's first term, but it was the Biden DOJ who was really weaponized against Mike, right?
Correct, because under Trump's first term, as we know, Christopher Wray and Comey, they were spying on Kash Patel, Carter Page. They were off the rails. So the fact that my husband was victim of that is no surprise. But the fact is, it's all coming out now of what was really going on in the spying. And we're a victim of that as well. It's so similar to Donald Trump's case of just making things up to make it a case out of nothing.
Well, and one of the biggest successes of President Trump's first term was the First Step Act. And under that provision, there was a great amount of sympathy that was shown by President Trump and the people who were supporting this reform, because they laid out a limit of how far someone can be imprisoned away from their family. And this violates that, doesn't it?
It does. It's 600 miles away. And again, what I have to tell you this is that based on the sentencing report, which was filled with lies about my husband, that he's this horrible person, he was stalking, of course they're going to send him far away from, as a police officer, away from this area. but you're basing it on bad information.
Yeah.
So, and listen, everybody was very kind there. Yesterday was leaving him there was extremely painful.
I'm sure.
But everyone was nice to him. But yes, I think Donald Trump is going to be horrified because I can't visit him every day, or my children, or to fly 600 miles away just so we can see him for an hour. I mean, it's making me sick just even saying that, because he's done nothing wrong. So again, he's overpunished, overcharged.
Sure.
It is the classic case of abuse and weaponization of the FBI, which is out of control, and the DOJ and the Eastern District of New York was
Martha, I don't want to cut you off, but I spent about 30 minutes, everybody, with Martha on my podcast, Furthermore with Amanda Head. So if you want to hear more details about it, go check that out. But that's all we have time for.